everybody. I did not check my green screen before starting. It's fine. Let me maybe just crop it. Wait, there we go. Oh, I hope everything works. Haven't done this in a while. I was on a vacation. And I already forgot absolutely everything we were working on. So I'm gonna need a little bit of a refresher. But I was working on my thing on the side a little bit. I can show just a little bit how far I've got. Felt pretty proud about how it turned out a little bit. Let's see if this is gonna work. Okay, debug. Ah, it's showing up, okay. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with, this is just spawning drones and making them grow bigger and scaling them. And the pivot point of the scale is what makes it look like it's scaling, you know, in a different, it's not scaling from the center of the drone, it's scaling from the center of the screen or thereabout. The black circles you actually see flying by as well, those are the middle points from which the objects are getting scaled from. And that gives you a little bit of a depth perception. And if you can notice, when drones are small, when they're not in your depths, so to say, they don't have collision, and then when they are and they do get to you, they do. I have here above a texture that I was playing around with for the clouds. Although I still do not know how to procedurally generate them, so I don't want them to be the same shape and size every time. So we'll see how that goes with time. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this looks. And if I leave this same code and just play around with the speed and the opacity maybe of the things flying to you, I think you can get a pretty good perception of like falling. And you know, if I put some lines and some, you know, some animations, it will have a pretty good perception of falling down, I think. And speed. But the floatiness of the character I really like. Should probably play with those settings as well, because he does feel a little slow when moving. Like the top speed is pretty slow. But yeah, that's how far I've got. The biggest problem for me was, let's see if I can show some scripts. Where was that? Pivot point. Bro. Yeah, so to have a pivot point at which you can, let's actually do this. To have a pivot point, so for the drone to have a pivot point that's not its center or anywhere near the sprite, I had to use a control node that is, I think, normally part of the canvas layer and used for UI and things like that. So the control node actually does have a pivot point property. And then I was able to move that in the middle of the screen, so when I scale, it actually scales from that point as the center. So if you have a drone and you have this as this point, and you say you want to make it double as big, it's gonna be double as big, but it's gonna move here twice as much from this point. So that's what I actually wanted. So that's how that works. So, oh, and another thing that was pretty useful, I saw it in one of the videos. If you can actually set up like a global, a lot of global variables. So here I set up in the level, I set up a global node, and that node has a script, which basically has everything in it that I need, like the screen sizes, the spawn areas, defined and all that. That all gets calculated. And then here in the project settings, in where was that? Autoloader, yes. In the autoloader here on the tab, you can actually preload that scene, and then you can call it in code wherever. That's really, really handy. So I can just say global dot something, and it calls that variable immediately from that preloaded scene. That was great. But yeah, this took me a long time, just this one line of code to get the to get that what I was thinking of the whole time, or what I had as an idea. So yeah, that's. Oh, and I did a very. It took me a lot. I lost a lot of time because instead of in the process function, I was doing all that in the ready function, and then the global position was always 0, 0, and I did not understand why. And of course, when you instantiate anything in the tree, it starts at 0, 0, I think, and then you have to call it in, actually put it into position in code. So that I did not understand, and it took me like hours to figure out, oh, I'm in the ready function, I should be in the process function, and call the global position every frame, and not just but yeah, that's rookie mistakes. That's how that goes. But we're gonna continue with our tutorial. I need to get a refresher what we even did last time. I think we spawned in or programmed the spawning in of the laser, right? I think I'm gonna have a refresher and just look at that thing in the video, just to refresh myself.
Let's start. With that, we just have to do an exercise, and then we are done with another really important bit. I don't think we have to practice with rigid bodies too much, because they're ultimately not that complicated. However, what I do want to practice is the laser, and this is the one part of the game that we definitely have to work on. I want you guys to move the laser in the player direction, like we have done for the grenade. Pause the video now, try to implement this one. I want to look at the level, and in there, first of all, I want to get rid of the grenade, because this one shouldn't be there in the first place. Now we can work on the laser. This part just annoyed me. Okay, so for the laser, we have to look at some code. We are creating a laser in the onPlayer laser function, and this one right now only has a position. Besides that, we also want a direction. This direction we have to generate inside of the player. And for that, let's look at the player. Inside of this if statement, we are generating the laser action. So this one will also need the direction. I'm going to put this right below the other variables, but you can basically put it wherever you want. Once again, I want to create a player direction. This player direction is going to be a new vector, and for that, I want to get global mouse level, and once again, I want to extend all of this. I want to get the grenade, and this now has an attribute, which is going to be the speed. Let's try all of that again. It is working. Well, the grenades are moving faster. So that's a good sign. Although there's one more thing that I do want to do. So let's say I hit a wall, something like this. Right now, the grenades stick to the wall almost perfectly. But that I don't like so much. To overcome that, I am going to work inside of the inspector, inside of the physics material. I'm going to set the friction to 10 and the bounce to 0.4. Besides that, under linear, we have damp, and this I want to set to 1.6. With that, if I try all of that again and hit a wall, we get quite a bit more bounce. That I do like a bit more. Also, when we hit other rigid bodies, we get basically billiard. So if you want to make that kind of game, you now have a really good start. With that, we just have to do an exercise, and then we are done with another really important bit. I don't think we have to practice with rigid bodies too much, because they're ultimately not that complicated. However, what I do want to practice is the laser, and this is the one part of the game that we definitely have to work on. I want you guys to move the laser in the player direction, like we have done for the grenade. Pause the video now, try to implement this one. I want to look at the level, and in there, first of all, I want to get rid of the grenade, because this one shouldn't be there in the first place. Now we can work on the laser. This part just annoyed me. Okay, so for the laser, we have to look at some code. We are creating a laser in the onPlayer laser function, and this one right now only has a position. Besides that, we also want a direction. This direction we have to generate inside of the player. And for that, let's look at the player. Inside of this if statement, we are generating the laser action. So this one will also need the direction. I'm going to put this right below the other variables, but you can basically put it wherever you want. Once again, I want to create a player direction. This player direction is going to be a new vector, and for that, I want to get global mouse position and then subtract the current position of the player. All of that, we also have to normalize, and then we are good to go. One important thing to mention now is that we now have a player direction inside of this if statement and another one inside of this if statement, which, well, is a bit unnecessary. We can simplify this by simply cutting out the first one and then placing it before the if statements. That way, we don't need the second one anymore. Next up, when we are emitting the laser signal, besides the position, I also want to get the player direction. On top of that, all the way at the top, right now, when we are declaring the signal, we only have the position. Now, all of this would still work, but nonetheless, you want to add the direction in there for one important reason. If I minimize all of this and go back to my level scene, in there we have the player, and the player has two signals. We have the grenade, and this one shows the position and the direction. However, the laser only has the position right now. And it shows the position because inside of the script for the player, we only have the position. If I add the direction and then save all of this, we now get laser, position, and direction. So this makes it much easier to see what's going on in your game. You could leave all of this entirely blank and it would still work, but if you work with anybody else, or if you are not looking at your game for some time and come back to it, this would become incredibly confusing. Adding these parameters here is really good documentation of your code. But alright, with that, we have a laser signal and we are emitting the position and the direction. which means now inside of the level, we are getting the position and the direction. So now inside of the laser, we can use all of that. For this one, we want to get our laser, and now we have a bit of a problem, because for the grenade, so the rigid body 2D, we could use the linear velocity. But for the laser, such an attribute does not exist. And just to be consistent here, it's going to be an area 2D. So what can we do to move the laser in a certain direction? Well, all we have to do is once again get our rotation degrees. To get the rotation degrees, all we have to do is get the direction and then use the angle method. Any vector in Godot has this method. It simply converts a vector to an angle. However, it returns radians, not degrees. So you can make an adoption in one of two ways. Either you could wrap all of this inside of another function, and the function you want is called rad_2_degree, or just deg. This converts a radiant to a degree. Alternatively, since the rotation by itself is looking for a radian, this would also work just fine. However, if I run all of this now and I shoot, we get some slightly weird behavior. So this is not ideal. The reason for that, if I open the laser scene, you might already see it. By default, the vector position for 0 goes this way, but our laser points up. Because of that, our direction is wrong by 90 degrees. Now, you could rotate the laser, but in my case, since I want to demonstrate a couple of different approaches, we can do something different. Back inside of the level, I want to expand all of this. I once again want to use rotation degrees, because that's going to make the math easier. And I want to convert the angle we get from the direction and convert this with rad to degree, like so. All we have to do is add plus 90, and this would also work. So let's try this one. And now we get a better behavior. So the laser is pointing in the right direction. It's just not moving in the right direction. It always moves up. But we certainly make progress. The reason why the laser is always moving up, let's have a look at the script. We have a direction that is a vector 2, and this one is always going up. So this vector we have to change, which we can do inside of the level. I want to get the laser, and now one attribute is direction. This is the direction we have declared here. And this direction is just going to be the direction we are getting from the player. So the one we are getting via the attributes. And now this is feeling drastically better. And with that, we have our laser. And it's working really good. Cool. So with that, we have covered another really important part of Godot. At this point, you should have at least a basic understanding of the different physics bodies and also how to create instances of a scene in code, which is super useful to create bullets or lasers or stuff like that. For this part, we're going to cover something surprisingly easy, the camera. All we have to do for that is to add one more node to our player, and then we are done. There's no theory to cover here, let's jump right in. Here we are back in Godot, and if I run the game, you can very much tell there just isn't very much space. All of this feels incredibly cramped. So what I want to have is a camera that follows the player, which would enable us to actually explore the level. And for that, like basically anything else in Godot, we have to learn about another node. That node is called a camera. And the first thing you have to know about it is that it wants to be the child of the node it follows, which in our case will be the player, which means with the instance of the player selected, I want to add a camera 2D. And now we get another box around the player. It's a pinkish color that, well, shows us another outline. Now if I run the game, we already get some very different behavior. It's as easy as that to add a camera. However, at this point, if I move around a tiny bit, you can see there's some weird jankiness. If you follow along, just move around yourself, it doesn't feel very natural. That is because the camera 2D is lagging behind the object it follows. It's not a perfect one-to-one movement, instead there's supposed to be some smoothness. That smoothness you get under position smoothing, and you basically always want to have this enabled, otherwise your game is going to look quite weird. You can set a speed, although 5 pixels per second is usually what you want. Now with that, if I run all of this again, now our game is feeling much better. And if I stop the movement, you can see the camera is catching up to the player very, very quickly, but there definitely is some kind of movement swing after we stop moving. And with that, we have a camera that's actually looking good. Now, another thing that you probably want to do is set the zoom level. This tells you how big this rectangle is going to be, so the actual visible area. For example, we could set this to 0.6. And now you are going to see much more of the level. And this is what I think I used for the final game. So this is what I quite like. Other than that, you have a few more attributes you could be working with. For example, you could give the camera an offset. And if I set this to, let's use a larger number, 300 pixels, you can already tell now the camera is being offset by 300 pixels. This would also be visible in the game. Let's run all of this again. And there we go. Now the player is always at the top and the object or the gate is still there. There are a few more things you could work with, but most of them aren't terribly important. I guess rotation could also be an attribute, but in our case, the player isn't going to rotate. So all of this gets much easier. The last attribute you might be interested in is the limit. And this tells you how far the camera is going to go. For example, if I set the left side, which right now is at minus 10 million, if I set this to 0, you can already see it in the game. Now the camera cannot exceed the left side of 0 pixels. 0 pixels is this side, and our camera can never exceed it. So now if I run the game, you can see our camera is never going further, and if I go up and you see the gate, you can actually tell what's going on. So our camera can never go further to the left, but we can still go further to the right. Cool. Now in my case, I don't want to have this enabled, and I also want to set the offset to 0. But these are options you might find interesting. But other than that, a camera really isn't terribly complicated, so there isn't that much you have to know about it. But before I finish this part, there's one more thing I do want to cover, and that is the actual size of the game. So right now, you can see we have this blue outline around our game, and this is telling us how big the window is. And this you can change quite easily. This happens inside of project and project settings, and in there, you have lots of...
It's so cool that some of the nodes and some of the things are just so plug and play, like the camera. And there's a lot of, I already saw that there's a lot of like plugins for third-person cameras. You know, already all types of inventory systems, for instance, that you can just plug in and play around with. But yeah, some things are way more complicated, and you need a bunch of code to get it working, like player movement, for instance. But some things are, it seems very arbitrary which things are easy and which are not, or which are streamlined, which are not.
Options that can determine how to...
And that's probably what's a very big plus for huge long-standing engines like Unreal and stuff. A lot of this is much easier, probably.
Game is run on a computer. The option you want to look at is under display, and there we have a window. Right now, we have a window size of 1152 and 648. I have no idea how we get those numbers, but you can change them quite easily. In my case, I'm going with 1280 by 720. Those feel like much more natural numbers. You can also set a whole bunch of other variables, but in my case, I'm not going to bother too much. Also, if you have a larger window, you could set larger numbers. Just choose whatever you think is best. So with that said, let's run all of this again. And now we get a slightly larger window. And that is all we need for this part. The camera ultimately is a really easy thing to implement. For the next part though, we are going to cover how to actually fill out the level with something that looks good. So there's actually a point to exploring the game. I'll see you there. Now that we can...
What I don't understand about all this is, like, what's the difference? What's the... So the viewport is just the size of the debugging, like, play testing. Hey, Chocolate, welcome. Play testing screen of the window of Godot. But how does the viewport size and the camera size translate to the hardware that people are playing the game with? How's it going, my man? What's new? What's good?
Move around, it is becoming a bit obvious that our level is just not looking very good, simply because we don't have that many images. So what I want to cover in this section is how to display lots of images. Or more specifically, we want to decorate the level with images. And there are a couple of ways you can approach this. The easiest one is you can simply place a lot of sprites and then modify them quite a bit. You can do that either by changing the scale or the color values. And this is what I want to start with. Although I already want to emphasize, for any kind of complex setup, this is not going to be good enough. For that, we're going to use a tile map. That I will cover in just a bit. For now, let's place some sprites, because they can do quite a bit.
Why was it painful?
Back in Godot, we can see that we have a gate and a player. Those are the only things visible, which isn't very much, and that's the main reason why our level doesn't look very good. To make all of that a bit prettier, with the level node selected, I want to add another node. And this, for now, is going to be a node 2D. Which I'm going to rename right away. Let's call this one the ground. And this ground should be below everything else, so I'm placing it before the gate and the player. This ground for now is going to get a sprite. I want to rename this one right away as well. Let's call this one the soil. Now that we have that, I want to go to graphics, and in there we have a folder called ground. There we have dirt, mesh, and stones. Stones is the one I want to use, so I'm going to drag it into the texture tab, and now we get a texture. Let me move it a bit around, and with that, if I restart the game, this is already looking a little bit better. Not that much, but it's certainly an improvement. For now, the major issue is that this texture is ending quite quickly. So this isn't ideal. Which means now we have to figure out how to extend this texture. And the first thing you could be doing is, if you go to transform and look at scale, you could scale this by a factor of 100. And well, you would have technically...
Wait. Why is mine so small?
Now that we have that, I want to go to graphics, and in there we have a folder called ground. There we have dirt, mesh, and stones. Stones is the one I want to use. So I'm going to drag it into the texture tab. And now we get a texture. Let me move it a bit around. And with that, if I restart the game, this is already looking a little bit better. Not that much, but it's certainly an improvement. For now, the major issue is that this texture is ending quite quickly. So this isn't ideal. Which means now we have to figure out how to extend this texture.
It will be better for sure.
And the first thing you could be doing is, if you go to transform and look at scale, you could scale this by a factor of 100. And well, you would have technically an infinite texture.
Although I do understand tile maps already.
But it would look really bad.
In
so this
theory.
Isn't acceptable for a game. That being said though, if you scale it to something, let's say a factor of 5, this would still be looking fine. So this is definitely something you can work with. But in my case though, I don't want to use this scale at all. So I'm going to set it back to 1. Instead, I want to use the region. And we have seen this all the way at the beginning of this tutorial. So if I enable it, by default, the texture is going to disappear because we now use a rectangle that has an X and a Y position and a width and a height. By default, all of these are 0, so we are showing nothing of the texture. But we can edit the region with the Edit Region button, and there we can select what people simply pick one part of it. And there you can see inside of the game, we get this texture inside of the game. What we can also do is we can select a larger area. And let me select a much larger area. Something like this. And now we have, well, a larger texture, but it looks absolutely horrendous. And that is because Godot is stretching out the border pixels, which is not a good behavior. We can change that though.
You see that as bugs very often.
And this we do under texture, and there we have filter and repeat. Filter tells you when you are scaling the texture, how is it going to scale, which in our case, we're not going to touch. Repeat is what we care about, because in there we have inherit, disabled, and enabled. Enabled is what I want, and this is looking much better. With that, we get an actual texture that we can use basically infinitely. So let me run this again. And if you look very, very, very closely, so let me close the game. And if I zoom in, you can tell there we have repetition marks, which are quite fine. And for our game, they probably wouldn't be noticeable. And in an actual game, you could simply place some other object on top of that and then not worry about it. Also, if you zoom out, it's barely noticeable. So this is totally fine for a game. That would be the first way you can work with your level to add more images. And this is a really good start. So now, at the very least, we have some kind of background. Although I do want to add a bit more. So with the ground selected, I'm going to add another sprite node. And this sprite node, I'm going to call it decoration. The texture for that we get from decals, and there we have a dirt patch. This I want to drag into the texture, and now we get something like this. It's just a texture that is displaying some dirt. I think it's quite straightforward. And this one doesn't really fit into the background we have right now. So if you look at it inside of the game, I guess it kind of fits to an extent, but it could be better. To make this kind of thing look better with the decoration selected, you want to go to visibility, because there you have visible, this one should be obvious, but then you have modulate and self-modulate. And by default, they are showing a white color. And this one changes the color of this sprite texture. For example, if I change it like so, you can see we get some other kind of color. You can also change the transparency and then make it disappear or reappear. And in my case, we could make all of this quite a bit more orange. Although you would have to play around with this quite a bit to make it look really fit. We get some modulate. With the decoration selected, you want to go to visibility, because there you have visible, this one should be obvious, but then you have modulate and self-modulate. And by default, they are showing a white color. And this one changes the color of this sprite texture. For example, if I change it like so, you can see we get some other kind of color. You can also change the transparency and then make it disappear or reappear. And in my case, we could make all of this quite a bit more orange. Although you would have to play around with this quite a bit to make it look really fitting. And I just don't have the time inside of a tutorial. So let me do this a bit more roughly. I just want to wash it out so the color fits better. I guess this one fits slightly better. It's certainly an improvement, so I am reasonably happy with that. You might also be wondering, why is there modulate and self-modulate? What's the difference between the two? And if you hover over them, you can already get the answer. If you look at modulate, we got the color applied to this canvas item. This one should be quite obvious. The more important part comes next, and that is that this property does affect child nodes. Unlike self-modulate, which only affects the node itself. Which basically means that if this node has children, they would also be affected by modulate. However, self-modulate only affects the node itself, which means if there are children, they would be ignored. That's the only difference between the two. Cool. And with that, we have some more upgrades. I guess what you could also do is there's quite a bit of moss, and you could just drag it into the scene. Let's say like so, like so, like so, and just zoom in. There we get just a couple of moss images, and all of these moss images I want to have inside of the ground. That way we keep everything organized, which is really important for a more complex game. And well, these are once again just images you can move around. They don't do very much. So with that in place, let's play the game, and there we get more and more details. For an actual game, you basically want to keep on adding more images and then flesh out the game. The more you have and the better you get at placing them, the better your game is going to look. Although this kind of thing is really time intensive. So if you want to have a really good looking game, you will have to spend a lot of time working with these sprites. In my case though, I'm happy with this, and I think all of this is reasonably straightforward, so we don't have to practice it. Instead, there's something that I really want to cover, which is significantly more important. That topic is going to be tile maps. To explain what they are doing, let me show you an image. Here we have a couple of walls. And a tile map is dividing these into certain areas. You can set the size yourself, and when you design artwork, you want to keep this kind of grid in mind. And once we have this kind of grid, we can pick items from that and then place them in a certain position. For example, we could make something like this, where we take specific parts of the wall. For example, we are starting with this part and place it on the top left. Then we place another bit, this number 6, and place it there. Next up, we take number 7 and place it twice. And that way, we are creating much more complex images. With that system, you can create really complex levels and keep everything quite organized. And also, it allows you to place elements really precisely. Also, later on, you can add something like collisions or different visibility layers, something I'm also going to cover. That should cover the basics. Now, before we work with all of this in practice, I want to cover the basics in terms of naming. The most important part is a tile set. This is simply a graphic that we are separating into individual parts. Or to be more specific, each individual part is called a tile, which means a tile is a single graphic, then we have a tile set, and this one is a combination of tiles.
Yeah.
Finally, Godot specific, we have a tile map. And this is a Godot node that organizes tile sets. It can contain a single one, but it could also contain multiple. Tile maps in Godot are fairly powerful, so I will spend quite a bit of time on them. But with all of that covered, let's jump into the editor and let's have a look at all of this in practice. Back in Godot, I want to add another node, and I want to add it as a child to the ground node. So with Control or Command A, I want to add a tile map. If I add that, nothing is going to change in the game, but inside of the editor, we are now getting a tile map. This one contains a few tabs. We have tiles, patterns, and terrains. Although right now all of them are empty, so we can't use any of that. To make something work, we have to look on the right in the inspector. There is a tile set. Right now, this one is empty. And to create a new tile set, we have to click on empty and then new tile set. If I click on that, not much is going to change. Although at the bottom, we now have a tile set and a tile map. The basic separation between the two is that a tile map lets us use a tile map and draw things inside of the game. Whereas a tile set contains the graphics and lets us edit them. For example, in there, we could rename things, or we could add physics behavior and quite a bit more. I'll cover that in just a bit. First of all, though, I want to click on the tile set again. So inside of the inspector, I want to click on this tile set, because in there we get a few more options that are really important. Tile shape and tile size are the really important bits. Tile shape right now is square. Although besides that, we could also have isometric, half offset square, and hexagon. In our case, we want to have a square. And the square size we are setting in the tile size. By default, this one is 16 by 16 pixels. Although in our case, I want to have a size of 390 by 390. There's no universal tile size. This always depends on what kind of graphic you are using. Also, with these numbers selected, we can now see in the game some kind of
why does my thing look different? Tile map. Tile shape, tile layout. What? Tile set. This does not look the same at all. What? Yes, I did. Aha, I have to click on, that's the tile set type thing. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. 390? Okay.
grid. So this is definitely helpful. Although before we continue, let me explain what these numbers mean really quick. Here's the slide from earlier, and there are two attributes that we need to set. The first one is the shape of each tile. Right now, this is a square, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a square. For example, we could also have a hexagon, so then the tiles would look like this, and if I could draw, this would look halfway decent, but I hope you get the idea. The other attribute we have to work on is the width and the height of each of these tiles. By default in Godot, this was 16 by 16. But in our case, we are going with 390 by 390. That way, the tiles align perfectly with the graphic, and that sets the size of each of the tiles. So if you have a graphic where you don't know what the size is, you do want to play around with this quite a bit. If the size or the shape doesn't line up, none of this is going to work properly. With that, we have everything we need to get started, so I can minimize the tile set again. If I click on that as well, we are now getting the tile set inside of the editor. And essentially what Godot wants is that we are dragging a graphic into this table thing here. The graphics we're getting from graphics, and in there we have tile sets, and there we have a few different tile sets. The one you have seen in the slides is called outside walls. This I want to drag into the tile set, like so. And then we can already see the graphic. First of all though, Godot is giving us a message. If I expand this, it says auto-create tiles in non-transparent texture regions. Basically what Godot wants to do is to create a tile in all of the tiles where we have some kind of graphic. This I do want to do, so I'm going to click on yes. And with that, let me expand this field by clicking on the icon. We now get a selectable graphic in all of the tiles that have a graphic. So those two at the bottom don't have anything, so I have to click on them to activate them. And if I right click on them, I can delete them again, which unselects them. which is the behavior I want because those two tiles are going to be useless. I don't need them. Now we have a tile set. And this tile set right now we can change. This, for example, we could do inside of this field. We could, for example, change the name. Right now, the name is the name of the file, which isn't ideal. So
now my question is, for instance, you have a top-down game, you have a tile set, and you build a whole house using the walls, you know, the floor, things like that. Would you be able to select all those tiles and rotate them off the grid? Or would you need to use some other type for that?
let me rename it to walls. That seems a bit better. You could also change the margin or the separation. Let me change the separation to 50. Then you can tell we have a gap of 50 pixels between them, which is very much not what I want. But if you have some kind of graphic where you don't know the tile size, you do want to play around with them quite a bit. You could also, if you look at the top, select the tile. So if I click
yeah, I don't
select,
think so too.
we get a few more information. For example, we could add an animation, we could change the rendering, but I am not going to do any of these things. What I am going to work on later on though is the paint tab. In there, we can paint properties. And the properties we could paint are quite diverse. For example, later on, we're going to add a physics layer, which is telling Godot that we want to have collisions with all of these sprites. But this is going to come later. For now, inside of the setup, because I changed the properties, some of these tiles are unselected. So I want to click on them to make them available again. That way, I can use all of them inside of the editor. And well, with that, I can minimize this tab by clicking on the icon at the bottom right again. And now with the tile map selected, all I have to do is select one of these tiles, then click on the level, and now I can paint these tiles and create a wall, for example. I could make this even more elaborate and make a larger wall that has a corner, something like this. And with that, we have a wall. I can run the game now, and we can see the wall in the game. This is looking really good. So I am quite happy with this one. Although the actual wall I don't want to have like this, so I want to delete the tiles. For that, I simply have to right-click on the tile and then it gets deleted. Instead, what I want to do for now, since the player isn't supposed to get into this area in the back, I want to create a wall, let's say roughly here, and then move around. I guess we can place one more here, and then on the other side, we could start a wall, something like this. And since the player isn't going to see this part here at all anyway, we don't have to worry too much about what the graphics look like. So I want to have a few more walls, and you definitely want to play around with this and spend some time on it. But this for tutorial is totally fine. So now let's run this again. And now we are seeing a wall. And right now there's too much of a gap. So we do have to work on that. I guess later on I could add, for example, another kind of object in there. But the wall otherwise is working just fine. This is covering the absolute basics of a tile map. That being said, though, tile map.
I believe you. Like pathfinding is a pain in the ass. Although with nav meshes it's doable. And I think I saw in some videos that it's actually easier almost to do like 3D pathfinding in 3D because the nav meshes get you can generate nav meshes automatically from the 3D mesh, and in 2D you have to paint them. Godot, at least, I think.
Are really powerful, so there's a lot more to cover. I guess what I want to start with the tile set selected. I want to add another tile set. Right now we have walls. Besides that, I want to have soil. So this I also want to drag in there. And then Godot is asking us once again, do you want to auto-create tiles? And this I do want to do. Now we have a second tile set. I want to rename this one as
I like
well.
this workflow
Let's
a lot.
name it soil. And this is just about all we have to do in here. There isn't that much more, and this tile set is quite simple. So we just have a couple of dirt textures, basically. Those I can also use inside of the tile map. So now besides the walls, we have the soil. And this soil I can also place on the map just fine. So this one works just as intended. However, we do have a problem now. If I place the soil tile in the same tile where I have the wall, we can see we are deleting the wall, which is very much not intended.
We need layers.
So let me undo it. And instead what I want is to have these soil tiles always below the walls. And to achieve that, I have to work with layers.
Yeah.
So there, on the tile map, we have layers. Right now, we only have a single layer. And this I want to give a name right away. Let's call this one the walls. And if I type in here a name, you can also see we have walls in this tab as well. This is really important. Keep this in mind. What you can also do is add another element, which is what I want to do, because besides the walls, I also want to have soil or ground or whatever you want to name it. With that, we have two layers. And the order of these two layers is really important. Whichever layer comes first is going to be below the other layer. This works kind of like what we have seen with the nodes. So in our case, we have the wrong behavior right now, where the soil is on top of the walls. And this you can change quite easily. All you have to do is pick this icon on the left, the three lines, and then move it where you want it to be. So now we have the soil below the walls. Which means now, whatever we are placing inside of the soil layer is going to be below the walls. And these layers you select with this tab, where we have soil and we have the walls. And if you select one of them, right now, all of our tiles are inside of...
Couldn't you just auto assign a layer to the whole tile set? That would be so great for workflow.
Of the walls layer. So from this, I want to get rid of all of the soil. Which means at this point, I only have walls on this layer. But if I select soil, these walls become a bit more transparent. Which is indicating to me that we don't have them in the current layer. And instead what I can do, I could, for example, draw below them a couple of tiles with soil. And
oh hey, load one, welcome to the stream.
Let me do it like this, so all of this isn't looking.
Just a sec. I don't have my events up. Let me just pull that up real quick, so I can see, you know. Somebody follows, subscribes, rings the bell, fires up some smoke signals, etc. How you doing, man?
If I once again...
And what do you mean, yeah? What do you mean that tile maps are like onions? If they're because they're layered, yeah. Then a lot of things in computer programs are like onions.
Select the walls.
Or you mean they make you cry?
Soil, this is a bit hard to see, but the soil is now blacked out and we can see the walls again. And if I unselect
both,
the entire map, we can see we now have a wall, and below that we have tiles with the soil. This also works in the game.
Are you a game dev as well? Do you have, well, not as, I'm saying as well like I'm a game dev. I'm not a game dev yet. Are you an experienced game dev? Are you working on stuff? And if you are, what you're working on?
And if I walk over there, we get quite a nice looking graphic. So this is looking really good. What you can also do with the tile map selected again, on the right side, it's going to be quite annoying to
Oh,
draw
nice,
all
man.
of these tiles. So if I simply want
Welcome.
to paint
Welcome to the
this
club.
one area, selecting every single tile is going to be kind of annoying. And for that, Godot has a couple of...
Well, you know, if you're going to driver's ed, you're not a driver yet, right? You need some kind of stamp of something. That's what I'm kind of thinking, you know?
features. So right now we have this pen selected, which says paint. On top of that, we could also draw a line.
Or although I did make a skydiver fall down from the sky, and the drones do get properly scaled. Did you see that? Did I show you that? So it's not yet a game because it doesn't have a purpose, but you know, there's a lot of games without purpose that exist. So maybe I am a game dev. I'm kind of, in my mind, I'm kind of thinking like I'll be a game dev once somebody gives me like a cent. As soon as there's an exchange of, you know, if somebody or no, I didn't finish it, but I want to do procedural. Or at least, you know, spawning clouds of different shapes and sizes that go by, and then I want to play. And now I've actually noticed that there's a shader editor here. I didn't even notice that before. This lower part of the editor. So I want to play around with that. I can show you real quick, or both of you guys. Let me just save this real quick. No, not seen. Actually, I don't think shaders are the most complicated thing there is. At least there's a lot of nodes and stuff. There's not a lot of programming, right? I mean, of course there's a lot of programming. There's a lot of programming and everything, but yeah, let me show you loud on what I made up until this point. I was watching this, so the clear code tutorial here. I would highly recommend it, but I did some things on the side. So my girlfriend is really crazy about skydiving, so I try to make like a skydiving thing. Oh, you watched that? Ooh, thank you very much. Chocolate, I know you were. I just don't know if you saw the drones whizzing by. I know you know. And this is like the texture of the sky, of the clouds that I was playing around with. And yeah, you did help a lot. But yeah, this is how far I've got so far. The real big problem for me was the code that offsets the pivot point offset, so the scale goes up. No, I didn't forget you. You just have like 27,000 YouTube accounts and nicknames. I know you're... Wait, let me see in Discord. You're fuck, I forget your name. Aren't you? Fuck. It's not that many people in Discord. Did you leave Discord? No, your Discord name is also different. Oh, yes, of course. Of course you can. Oh yeah, on YouTube. I need to add that in the description or somewhere. I always forget that there's no way. You know, on Twitch there are like links in the description of the... There you go. There you go. Welcome. This was a really big pain in the ass. Moving with like global positions, and the only thing that you don't know, Chocolate, is probably that I've I've set up a global node that I preload in project settings. And that's where I have all my global attributes. Which helps a lot, because you can call them... Yeah, Pinos. Weren't you in the Discord already? Why did you leave? Ah, my man. But yeah, so... This is pretty cool, because you can call them then just by global dot variable name. You can call it from anywhere in the code. That was great. I saw that in one video as like a tip. But yeah, let's go back. Accidentally. Yeah. I've heard that one before, bro. It's all fine. It's all good. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go back to our tile sets.
With this one selected, I can simply draw a line, and Godot is drawing a line from one point to another. What is a bit more useful is the rectangle. This one allows you to draw a rectangle, which is drastically faster.
That's cool.
You also have a fill bucket, and this one intelligently fills a certain area. Although this is not what I want to use right now, because, well, we don't want to fill every single tile. The way you would want to use the paint bucket is you want to draw an area of tiles, let's say something like this, and this needs to be enclosed, and in there you can fill the entire area. Although this is not what I want to do right now. Instead, I want to draw in the corners of this area here. So something like this, and there I realized that right now I am working on the walls. I should have been working inside of the soil. Which means I want to get rid of all of the tiles.
Oh no, there's no way to
created.
change
This
it.
shouldn't take too long.
There's no way to select them and just
and now,
change the
with
layer.
the soil selected, I want to draw a couple of corner pieces. Like so, like this one, like this one. For the downward pieces, I can use those. And then at some point, I'm going to go back to...
So Loud, you have a game you're working on as a start?
Now, for this one piece, we have a bit of a problem because we don't have a corner piece for this particular area.
Yeah, and I'm really fascinated by the systematic type gameplay as well. I would really like to work on like roaming AI, you know, like goal-oriented AI programming. Just like I would really like to expand on what Stalker did with like the roaming type thing. Ooh, nice. What's the like setting and theme of it?
Instead, I'm going to place a tile.
Is it a shooter or like
and
a
this wouldn't work in the
type
game
thing?
because you can see the transition from one tile to the other is looking pretty bad. To hide that later on, I'm going to place an object on top of that. If the player can't see it, it basically doesn't exist, so we don't have to worry about it too much. And now if I zoom out, I can close this area, something like that.
Wouldn't you be able to change that here somewhere? Because Game Maker has kind of like a rudimentary sprite drawing tool and things like that. That would be cool if you could do it right here. Ooh, nice. Very nice.
This, and then fill the entire thing with a paint bucket. With that, let me try the game, and I can still shoot the laser. That's a good start. And there we can see we have a wall, and the wall should probably be a bit longer. And on the right, we can see we have certainly an improvement, although we do have to extend the soil, and we have to later on hide this corner. First of all, with the soil selected, I want to click on region and edit region. With the editor selected, let me maximize the window. I want to expand this window as much as I can. And this, if you make it too large, can be a bit annoying to work with, but I think something like this should work. And there we go. Now we have a really wide level. Obviously, if you have your own game, you want to be a bit more specific here, but I think for my purposes, this is fine. I guess inside of the editor, we can change this from 25,000 to 22,000. That's looking a bit better. Let's say 20,000 pixels. That looks about right. Later on, we're going to constrain the player to roughly this area. That way, whatever happens outside of it doesn't really matter. But you don't want to have a graphic too large because that's going to affect performance, at least a little bit. I guess we could turn this to 16,000, and yeah, that feels a bit better. And for the height, I want to have 10,000. And next up, we have to hide this.
Yeah, I played it. I played Dwarf Fortress extensively. As the new Steam version with actual graphics came out, and I would like to play the I think the adventure mode just dropped, right? I want to play around with the adventure mode where you're just playing one dude.
This ugly corner. And I suppose a good way to...
Yeah, it's insane. The amount of systems and what the game keeps in mind or tracks is insane. And also that game was made by what? One dude for the past 20 something years? Yeah. Since 2002. So 22 years, my dude. You want to maybe scale that up, scale that down a little bit. Oh no, the Dwarf Fortresses exploded once it got on Steam. It was insane. Like when 2 years ago or a year ago when it came out. Yeah.
Place it in that position and make sure it's on top of the tile map. And that
there we
is
go.
Looking a bit better. I guess to make all of this look more realistic, we could take all of the moss and place it on top of the tile map.
Although I must say I've got more enjoyment out of RimWorld and a little bit scaled down games like that, because it's a lot easier to follow what's actually going on. And I would also recommend to you, if you like those types of games, Songs of Six. Sticks? Let me check. Also made by one dude. It's an excellent game. I like it a lot. Yeah, Songs of Six. So let me link this to you. It's made by one dude. It's more of a city management type game, but oh, sure. No worries. And there's Noraland. Noraland is coming pretty soon, in like 2 months, I think, in Steam Early Access, and it's basically if Crusader Kings and RimWorld had a baby, and I'm looking forward to that as well.
That's not what I meant to do. Something like this is better. And now we can simply have some moss along this tile map. And if you duplicate the nodes, you can add a lot of stuff in there quite quickly. Then...
And there was a story I remember that they thought they had a bug, like some cats were getting fucking drunk in Dwarf Fortress. And it turns out that in the tavern, everybody was you know, drinking and spilling drinks on the floor, and cats would walk on the floor, get their paws soaked in that drink, and then when they would clean themselves, they would get drunk. They kept dying. So that's how insanely detailed the simulation of Dwarf Fortress is. It's unfathomable to me.
I want to duplicate all of this with transform. I want to give it some rotation, move it there. And I can do this multiple times and simply add more and more tiles. Once again, the more detailed you add to your level, the better it is going to look, at least as a general rule. Finally, this wall is too short right now. So with the tile map selected, I want to work inside of the walls and add or paint a few more bits there. And this is not what I meant to do. There we go. And all right, with that, we have a much better looking level. This is a significant improvement. All we have to do now is do an exercise, and then we are done with another major part. I want you guys to create a new scene with an area 2D as the parent. The name of the scene should be house. Next up, I want you guys to add a tile map as a child and then use the interior.png graphic to create images for the house. To make all of that, you will need 3 layers. You will need the floor, then the outer walls, and then the interior walls. The order of this also matters. The floor should be at the bottom, next up you have the outer walls, and then the inner walls. I suppose I should explain the tile set first of all. Let's have a look really quick. Back in Godot, I am going to click on the interior.png tile set. There I can expand things a bit. We have lots of tiles. The ones for the floor are these. The outer walls are those, and then the inner walls are these ones at the bottom. You will have to play around with this for a bit, but I think once you have a bit of practice, this should be a fairly straightforward tile set. So pause the video now and try to figure this one out yourself.
Nice clear code. You gotcha. Let's do this. So a new scene, area 2D. Let's call this house. We're gonna save this in scenes. Is that an object? I guess it's an object. Sure. Then we need what do we need? It's a collision shape. Does it? It does. But he didn't say we should do it. It's not gonna work otherwise. Maybe because the tile set is gonna have collisions. Yeah, let's ignore that for now. We can add it later. Tile map. Tile map. Tile set is gonna be in the tile set interior. There we go. Oh no, what did you do? It was 16 by default. That we do not want. So I think it's 390 as well. Let's hope. Let's delete this. Nope. Let's try this again. I fucked something up by trying to be too fast, as per usual with all my stuff, with everything I do. New tile set, square 390. 390. Yes. Is that right now? That looks right. So we have half walls, a full walls, corner, and then like a 3-piece and a 4-piece. Those are doors, I guess. Heyo. Okay. So now we're gonna go back to the tile. To the layers, and Laurie's one. Cancer to use. Seems fine so far. You just need to get used to it, you know. So now my only question is patterns. Let's see. Interior walls. To separate this. There we go. Okay, we can just select these. And we can... Wait. Aha, there we go. If I select here, what? Aha, I need to do it then 3 times, right? No. I need to separate this in 3 tiles? Create an alternative tile. Alternative? Nope. So basically I need to turn all these tiles off. Right? Wasn't there an easier way to do this? There must be an easier way. So those are... This is the floors. Then we do this again. But now we delete other things. Okay, Chocolate, thanks for dropping by. See you next time, man. So this is the outer walls. Oh, there we go. Those are windows or doors. There's probably part of the inner thingy. And Then we have another one. Yes. That's interior walls. And then with the eraser, I'll remove all this. And enable that. Right? That seems right. So now if I go back to the tile map, there's probably an option somewhere to have this maybe clip just to the ones that are used. The only thing that's a bitch to remember, which I forget to do in my professional work as well, is change fucking layers when working. That's so annoying. It's a shame you can auto-assign layers to existing just to the tile map. Maybe you can do that in code if ID, you know, put on, I don't know, layer. Maybe. So was that it? Create a new scene with an area 2D as the parent, call it house, add a tile map as a child, and use the interior.png graphic to create the images for the house. Okay. Oh, I have node configuration warning. There we go. That's something I should not have clicked on. We should be good now. Let's go.
Back in Godot, I want to make all of this a bit smaller and instead create a new scene. This new scene as the parent is going to get an area 2D. This area 2D I want to rename right away to house. With that, I can save all of that in scenes, and I guess we could create a new folder. Let's call this one houses. In case you want to create more, you could create multiple in here, although I'm going to stick with one. Now with that, we have a new scene. This one is supposed to get a child, which would be a tile map. What is tile map now? We have to set the tile map. Right now it's empty, so we need a new tile map. On this tile set, I want to click again and change the size to 390 by 390. With that, we can drag the interior.png into the tile set. And we do want to create tiles automatically. And there are all of the tiles we could be working with. That's looking really good. Also, just to stay consistent, I am going to rename all of this and call it interior. So with that, if I click on the tile map, we could start drawing. But this is not what I want to start with. Instead, I want to look at the layers and then create the 3 layers I will need. First of all, we have the floor. Then I want to have another element, which is going to be the outer walls. Finally, we have the inner walls or interior walls. The name here really doesn't matter that much. All that matters is then we can separate the different layers inside of this drop-down menu. Let's get started with the floor. And for that, we have this tile. And this is what I want to start with. So with this one selected, I want to draw a rough area for the house, something like so. And if you zoom in, you can see there's a separation between the various tiles, which I think is looking pretty good. Now that we have that, I can click on outer walls, and the outer walls are supposed to be this area. On top of that, we have these ending bits that we can use to close a door. Once I use it, this is going to make much more sense. So,
okay, so I didn't need to do this. I didn't need to separate 3 different tiles. I mean, it's logical that I didn't need to do this. but it kind of feels better. Hmm. Yeah. Let's go back and fix this real quick. This one. Is this also nothing here? Yep. There's nothing here. Nope. Yeah. Oh, this is gonna be such a pain in the ass to keep changing levels or layers.
I want to draw a wall around all of this. So I have to make sure I always select the right tile and then simply drag all of it around the area of the floor we just created. That's looking pretty good. And now if I zoom into the tile set, we have these ending parts. So this one would be for the left side and this one would be for the right side. That way we don't have a simple ending of the graphic, which would look a bit weird. Next up, I want to select the floor again, because now we have this empty space between the floor and the wall. And to fill that, I have these ending parts. So I can simply drag my mouse over all of them and then paint in the edge bits. And there I made a mistake. So with this kind of thing, you just want to keep on working, and if you make a mistake, just fix it really quick. You are going to make quite a few mistakes. All right, cool. With that, we have all of the edge bits besides the ones for the entrance. The entrance is a bit special because those get these tiles. So not this one, but this one. That way we cover the area up to the wall, which I think looks better. And now if I unselect the tile map, we can see we have the area for a house. This house we can simply put into the level, and then we have another area. Although before I am doing that, we still have the warning that we don't have a shape for this area 2D. That we can change quite easily. I want to give it a collision shape 2D, and the shape is going to be a new rectangle shape. And this rectangle shape I have to extend because it's quite a large area we have to work with. Let's say something like this would work just fine. You don't have to be too precise here. It doesn't matter that much, but this is looking all right. With that, we have a house. So now back inside of the level, still inside of the ground, I want to add this scene, and I call this one house. And now we can move this house around. We could give it a rotation under transform. Let's rotate it to something like this. And then if I run the game again, I can move to the house, and eventually there we have it. The entrance is probably a bit too large, but it doesn't matter that much. And well, this is looking really good. We have a house. Although right now we don't have an interior. For that, back in the house, I want to keep on working with the tile map. Also, I want to move the collision shape behind the tile map. For Godot, the order of these two nodes doesn't matter. In our case though, the tile map on top makes it much easier to work with. Cool. Now, with the inner walls selected, I want to look at the bottom, and there we have all of the inner walls. And for those, I want to zoom in a bit. And there, for example, we could take this tile, this would be an ending bit, and then add a few interior walls. There we have a corner part, and then we can go this way. If you haven't worked with these tile sets before, they're probably a bit difficult to work with, so sorry about that. But this is just a matter of practice. So like this, we have added an interior wall. That's probably a bit too far up. So let me get rid of all of this and instead start placing it, I guess here is okay. So I want to once again create a door inside of this area, and then the rest is going to be just a wall. And just for the sake of adding something else in there, I guess at the top, we could section off this area. For that, I want to have an ending bit here and an ending bit at the other side, and then simply drag a wall all across them. And to decorate this a bit better, we can get this T-shaped piece and then add another separation. With that, if I return to the level, we can't see anything, and that is because I didn't save the scene. So if I save it, and now we go back, we can see we have actual interior walls for this house. Let's try all of this again, and I do have to walk a bit, which is fine. There we go. We have interior walls. If we add more objects inside of it, this would also look much better, something we are going to work on in a bit. But for now, this section got quite long, so let's finish it here. Now that we have a tile map, we should discuss physics a bit more. In particular, I want to talk about physics layers. And there are two issues we have to address right now. And let me demonstrate all of this in Godot. That should illustrate all of this the best. Here we are back in Godot, and the most obvious issue. If I run all of this, I can still move the player, and I can still shoot, but at some point, once we reach the house, there are no collisions, which obviously is not great. So this is something we have to work on. On top of that though, and let me demonstrate this inside of the editor. We have this area, and this area later on will be a transition point, which means if the player collides with it, we're going to load an inside level. For that though, we want to make sure that only the player can interact with this area. We don't want to load a new area if any other object collides with it. For example, if an enemy moves into it, or if we shoot a laser into it, we don't want to launch a new level. I can actually demonstrate this as well. So if I run all of this again, and if the player goes into the area, we get player has entered the gate and then the player node. And that's totally fine. However, if I'm shooting the grenade into this area, we get grenade and we also get player has entered the gate, which basically means that we are getting some inconsistent behavior. The reason why we are getting this is that this gate, or the area to the inside of the gate, only really cares that a body is entering this area. It doesn't care which kind of body. So the body could be the player, but it could also be an enemy, or it could be the grenade. The laser though wouldn't trigger it because that's an area, not a body. But we still have to account for that. Fortunately, that is very easy to do using physics layers, and let's talk about them. In Godot, every collision object has a collision layer. So if you look at any kind of collision object, we could look at the player. Let me open the scene. In there, we have the character body 2D. This is a collision object. And this one on the right inside of the inspector has a collision. In there, we have a safe margin. This one I'm just going to ignore. Then we have a layer and we have a mask. This kind of collision system we have for every single collidable object. For example, if I look at the grenade, there, if I minimize the physics a bit further down, we have collision, and once again, we have a layer and we have a mask. So what does that mean? In Godot, you can place collidable objects on various layers and then also tell them to only interact with objects on a certain kind of layer. And for that, we have a layer and a mask. How the system is going to work is that a layer determines on which layer an object itself is, while a mask determines which layer it can interact with. And this might sound a bit confusing, so let's do an example. Here's the definition again, and in our game, we are going to have multiple layers. We have a layer for the player, the enemies, the objects, the projectiles, and then for items and zones. The player scene, or more specifically, the character body 2D for the player, is going to be on the player layer. But the mask for it is going to interact with all of the other layers, which means that the player can interact physically with all of these other layers. For another example, we have the enemies, and the enemies itself are going to be on the enemies layer. That should be fairly straightforward. However, for the mask, we will only have the player, the objects, and the projectiles, which means enemies can only interact with those layers.
So that's a big difference in games, is can the enemy hurt themselves, right? If they're attacking each other and things like that, like in Dark Souls or roguelikes, or, you know. And there, I think the only, like, flag that needs to be put is that it can interact with its own layer as well, right?
They cannot interact with items or zones. And this would fix the gate behavior, where we only want the player to interact with it, but no other object inside of the game. And, well, with that, we have a few things to implement. So let's go back to Godot, and then we can make some changes. I want to start with the player scene. In there, we have the character body 2D that we called player. If we look there, on the right, we have collision. The layer is going to set which layer this object is on. And in there, we have a couple of numbers. Right now, they always say layer 1, 2, or 3, which doesn't tell you very much. To make this system a bit easier to comprehend, you want to go to Project, and there, if you scroll down, I already have it selected, we have 2D physics. There you can give layers names that are much more descriptive.
Cool. Okay.
In our case, we want to have layer 1 being the player layer, layer 2 is going to be for the enemies, layer 3 is going to be for the objects, layer 4 will be for projectiles, and finally, layer 5 will be for items and zones. Although the naming here really doesn't matter. You can name this whatever you want. You're going to see in a second what difference it is going to make. Now, if I follow that, if I hover over these layers, now we get for layer 1 player, for layer 2 enemies, and for layer 3, we get objects. On top of that, if I do the same thing for the mask, on number 1, we get player, on number 2, we get enemies, and on 3, we get objects. The same thing we have gotten for the layers. The really important thing you have to understand is that layers and masks talk about the same kind of layers. So for example, right now, the player would be on layer 1, which would be for the player, and it can only see itself. And that is because the mask is also for number 1. However, if I click on number 2, 3, 4, and 5, now the player is still on the layer for the player, but the player can also interact with all of the enemies, all of the objects, all of the projectiles, and all of the areas and items. Although right now, this doesn't do very much, because we also have to update everything else. For that, I want to look at the gate, because this is the easiest thing to work on right now. If I open that scene and click on Area 2D, we once again have a collision. Although now, for the layer, we don't want this to be on layer 1. Instead, the Area 2D should only be on layer 5. And then for the mask, we only want this to interact with the player. We do not want to enable enemies, for example, because this would allow any kind of enemy to interact with this object as well. Or area, not object. But you get the idea. And with that, we should already have a pretty good start. If I now run the game and go into the gate, we still get player has entered the gate. However, if I shoot a grenade, we are still getting the wrong behavior. And this is bringing us to a good challenging point. Let's do an exercise. I want you guys to look at the grenade and figure out why it still triggers the gate area 2D. As a tip, look at the layers and the mask for this scene. It should be fairly straightforward, but pause the video now and try to figure this one out.
Okay, fuck. I wasn't paying that much attention because Ruby got on my lap. And I was trying to rename the layers. But yeah, let's check this out. Okay, let's play the game first. Why do I not see my debug? Because it's still on the skydive. Nice. Here we go. Okay. Let me move that around here. Okay, so player has entered gate. I didn't change the gate thingy. Let's do that first. So that was the where are the layers? There we go. player, player. Here, player, player. Enemies, objects, and level, let's say. I don't know what he did. Don't remember the names. Ah, it's projectiles as well, right? Let's do projectiles. So you are level 5, not level 1. And you interact with the player, with enemies, with objects, not the level. And you interact with other projectiles, that's fine. Save. Save. Go back to gate. You are not a player, you're the level. And you only interact with the player. Should work now. Player has entered. And the grenade has not. Yay! Yeah. That was easy enough. Do the grenades still interact with each other? They do. That's exactly what I wanted. Okay, cool.
Let's have a look at the grenade. More specifically, I want to have a look at the rigid body 2D inside of the grenade scene. On there, once again, we have a layer and a mask. And the reason why we are still getting the wrong behavior is, as far as the Godot physics system is concerned, this grenade is the player because it is on the player layer, so layer 1. But this shouldn't be. Instead, it should be on layer 4. I think this one is for projectiles. There we go. Now if I run all of this again, I can shoot the grenade into the area and nothing is going to happen. So now we don't get a print statement anymore. This is exactly what we wanted. Although we also have to update the mask because a grenade is supposed to collide with the player, it is supposed to collide with the enemies, with the objects, and with projectiles itself. Especially the last one, projectiles. This means that one grenade scene can interact with another grenade scene. You can see this, for example, in the game. If I shoot one grenade and then another grenade, the two grenades interact. If I take this 4 away, they cannot interact with each other anymore. So now if I do the same thing again, they are simply ignoring each other, which is not what I want. So I'm going to enable all of that. All right, next up, we have to update the gate because in there we have a static body 2D. Inside of the gate, we have the collision, and this one should be on layer 3, which is for the objects. However, for the mask, we want this to be 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means this gate can interact with the player, the enemies, other objects, although this one we don't actually need because none of the objects are going to move. Although for number 4, we want this to interact with projectiles as well. Next up, for the laser, we have an area 2D. Although since this one is also a collision object, we have collision as well. For this one, the layer should be layer number 4 for projectiles, although a laser can interact with the player, the enemies, the objects, but not with other projectiles. I hope at this point you get the system, at least on a basic level. It doesn't get too complicated.
Yeah.
The major thing you have to remember is that you
like
want to set
layers
layers and masks really early on in the game, because later on, updating all of this can be quite tedious. Although, in our case, we are nearly done. Next up, I want to work on the house, because in there, we have an area 2D that later on I do want to use. So in there, for the collision, I only want this to be on layer, this one should be 5, and it can only interact with the player. So mask should be 1. With that, we have most of the things, although if I hold Control or Command Shift and O...
No, wait. That's wrong. That means that the enemies can walk through the house. Aha, no, that's... The tile map is gonna have its own collision. This is just the area of the house. Right, right. And it's only gonna detect us. That is right.
I can open up all of my scenes. In there, we have a few things with the player. So mask should be 1. With that, we have most of the things, although if I hold Control or Command Shift and O, I can open up all of my scenes. In there, we have a few more. The really important one is the drone. This is the one enemy we have right now. This one definitely needs a collision layer because it shouldn't be the player, it should just be enemies. Although it can interact with the player, with other enemies, objects.
What was that shortcut? Control?
So mask should be 1. With that, we have most of the things, all of my... So if I hold Control or Command Shift and O.
Ah, okay. Oh, we should write that down, definitely. That's really useful. Quick open scene. Cool. Oh, I haven't been doing nodes at all. I mean, this with tile maps and the camera and everything has been pretty straightforward. Although if you don't use it, you lose it, just like everything else. But you know, it is what it is. And that's why also kind of a big problem, especially if I'm thinking about doing like a, you know, like a top-down open world game that's system-based, is that you would work on clusters of like a class of thing for a while, right? For instance, you would do enemy AI, then you would construct, you know, a level, and I'm thinking about it, it would take so long to be in that one, in that one little niche when you're doing stuff, that I have a feeling I would forget everything else, you know? Like if you're level designing or just doing art or tile sets and mapping up a level for like weeks and weeks on end, you would just forget how to code with time. It's crazy. I really need to get, you know, working on it so you have the, so it becomes second nature. This is just all too much.
I can open up all of my scenes. In there, we have a few more. The really important one is the drone. This is the one enemy we have right now. This one definitely needs a collision layer because it shouldn't be the player, it should just be enemies. Although it can interact with the player, with other enemies, objects, and with projectiles. Other than that, we have the bed and the billboard, and those should be the last 2. Both of them are quite easy, so if I look at the collision, they should both be on the objects layer, and for the mast, they can interact with the enemies and with the projectiles. And then finally, let's work on the billboard. And this one, once again, should be on layer number 3, and it can interact with the player, the enemies, and the projectiles. And with that, we are done updating the physics layers. So let me close all of this because it's going to be really confusing having all of this open. Okay, this is feeling much better. Although I didn't mean to close the house. We're going to use that right now, actually. Cool, so with that, we have collision layers. And this is a really important system to get started with. So the next issue we have to deal with is how can we give the tile map a collision layer so the player can collide with it. And for that, if I minimize the layers and I click on the tile set itself, in there we have physics layers among a lot of other stuff, but this we can just ignore for now. Physics layers is what we care about. If I click on that, we can add an element. And there, once again, we get a collision layer and a collision mask. And if I hover over them, we get the usual layers. So we have the player, we have the enemies, we have objects, and we have projectiles. And since this is just going to be a static object, 1, 2, and 4 is what I want to select. Although I just realized this is wrong because this should just be number 3.
Yes.
Because collision layer is the layer it is on, and it's just going to be an object. However, it can collide with 1, 2, and 4. So the player, the enemies, and the projectiles. Getting these numbers confused is incredibly easy to do, so you do want to be careful here. If I run all of this now, we still don't get the proper behavior. So let me move over again.
It's no collision boxes, man.
And have grenades as well.
Collision shapes.
But we still don't get a collision. And I think you can understand why quite easily. If we look at this individual tile, Godot roughly knows that there is going to be some kind of collision because we have set a collision layer and a collision mask. What Godot doesn't know is which area can be collided with. All that Godot sees is that there is an image here, but this could mean anything. We could want to have a collision, for example, in a much larger area. As a consequence, we have to draw in the collision area. And for that, inside of the tile set, there we have paint. And it's called paint because we literally paint an area where we want collisions to happen. And let me extend all of this a bit. What I want to do, I want to click on select property editor, and now we have physics layer 0. If I click on that and zoom out a bit on a tile set, they can see the entire tile set. And if I zoom in again on the outer tiles, if I just click on this corner tile, there we get the entire collision area. This means that right now, all of this could be collided with, which is also not what we want. All of this bit and this inner bit should not be collidable. We only want to have the collision around the actual wall. And for that, on this left side, you have a painting area where you can paint in, or rather select an area that you want to have a collision on. And there you have a bunch of points that you want to move around. And right now, we don't have enough points for the curve, but if you click on a path between 2 points, you can add more points. There's no real limit to how many you have, so work with this to your heart's content.
But you cannot make it bigger?
With this.
The screen? I'll lose my fucking eyes doing this.
Something like this looks good. Now I have an area I actually want to have collisions for. And if I now click on the tile again, this is looking much better. And with that, if I run the game again and go to the area, I should have placed the house a bit closer, but I hope you get the idea. And this wasn't the curve that we needed. I think it was this one. Nope. There we go. Here we are in the right corner. And now we can see I cannot go further than this area. So this is working perfectly fine. Now, since we don't have collision areas for the other tiles, this doesn't work perfectly, but this is something we can work on quite well. Although drawing in all of these areas can be a bit cumbersome, but there are tools to make this easier. So right now I have this drawing area. If I click on another tile, we get literally the same area, which doesn't fit anymore. However, what you can do is click on these 3 dots and then flip horizontally. And now it fits again. Then I can do the same thing for the other corner and now flip vertically and click on the tile again, and there we go. Finally, for the last corner, I can do all of this again and flip horizontally again, and there we go. Now we have the 4 corners, which are the most time-consuming bit. For the straight lines, we can delete a couple of points. Let me get rid of most of them. And then simply move things around. And I didn't mean to delete this one. I just want to move the points. And obviously, once again, this is something for an actual game you do want to spend some time on. But I'm not too concerned with that. So in my case, I'm going to speed all of this up a bit. So this one is looking good. And now if I run all of this again, once again, I need a bit of walking around, but at least for the outer walls, this is working perfectly fine. Cool. So next up, we have a few more tiles. We have these door endy bits. And for that, let me just draw in the area. So this is looking roughly good. And then for the other bit, I want to have this bit and then flip vertically, and then we are done. Finally, for this tile, we have to create 2 areas, which is totally doable. So all I have to do is add another shape in there, something like this. And now if I click on the tile, there we have 2 areas. They are not perfect, but this is just a bit of refinement. What you can do, if you hold Control or Command and use the scroll wheel, you can zoom in.
Oh,
then
you
with
can
the mouse
zoom.
button, you can move around. So this
Oh my God.
is feeling a bit better. Cool. And then next up, we have left and
Oh, but
right.
the screen.
For that,
Oh my God.
I want to rotate everything right. And select both
But the
of
window
these,
is so
and then I
small.
can just delete where appropriate. And we are nearly done with this part. Okay, there we go. This is the first one. Now I can click on the other one and then flip horizontally. There we go. Now we have all the collision parts for the outer walls. Unfortunately, we have another part, and this is all the collision part for the inner walls. And this is going to be your exercise. Draw all of these areas, and if you get through that, you, well, have some really good practice to drawing in these areas. It unfortunately is kind of repetitive work, and you just have to get through it. Luckily though, it's not particularly difficult. And in my case, I'm going to speed up all of this because it's going to be really boring to watch.
My main problem is once I for instance, now I want to select this part again. Aha, swatch. Speaker. Oh, okay, there we go. All good, all good. All good. Why don't you update like you should? Speaker. Here. Horizontal. There we go. Okay. Whoa, what's with this little parts? This. And what's bad is you cannot press shift or control or something like in some other programs, so you can draw in a straight line. That would be very helpful indeed. But you know. Oh, hey, Jekyll Gamer. Oh, you can. Oh, nice. Yeah. That makes sense. That should be here. That should be here. Okay, nice. Yes. Oh, how's it going, man? Oh, I like little tips like that from chat. That makes it, you know, learning from the tutorial, you learn that, but you learn a little extra on the way. That's great. So let's add another polygon. Nice. Hey, doggo. Good morning. So, Jekyll, are you a game dev? Are you working on something at the moment? Yeah, hotkeys are displayed everywhere. Yeah. Oh, they are rotate. Yeah. Okay. I was kind of ignoring most of hotkeys till I get, swimming in this at all. HV, that makes sense. Here we go. But yeah, if you want to be efficient and do this, and not taking a million years, then it does make sense. Are you a game dev too? Working on something? Yeah. That's kind of one of the reasons why I picked Godot, because I wanted to not get stuck on a complicated language at first, Oh, thanks for the... This is much easier, yeah. It is, for sure. Not being able to resize this little window is killing me. But it is what it is. Okay, and what are you in what language are you working? Or like what program? Not what not what language. Language is C#. What engine are you using? Ah, Godot. Okay, so just not GD script then. Then we do this, and then we rotate like that, and then we do this and that, and we do this and that, and do this, and we do this. Yeah, I mean, if you can do... Hey, monkey! Welcome. Welcome to the stream. How are you doing? I mean, if you can do C#, GD script is like taking candy from a baby, right? It's... at least that's how that's how it seems to me. Is it gonna be a problem if I have too many points? Shouldn't be, right? Ah, it's fine. Everything is fine. And there we go. Okay. The doors, the little inner walls are done. Let's do this. You interested as well? There's been a huge surge of people getting interested. I think Thor did. I don't think we will even know the impact of what Thor did till like 7 years after this. There's a huge influx of first games that devs made because of Thor. Did you get interested in game dev because of Thor, or? I wouldn't be surprised. That's what got me in. Oh my god, you can. No, but just the sides. Or am I crazy? Am I crazy? Why can I make this box bigger? Please. Bah. Bah. I mean, it could be. It might be that I just don't see where the edge is because of the theme I have on, you know? But it seems... This seems fucked. Like this, I'm already... Like, my eyes are dying. So, normally I'm a... Professionally, I'm a CAD designer or like a technical drawer, draftsman, whatever you want to call it. And, yeah, little things like this that will just make your eyes fucking murder your eyes if you work on it constantly. That's something I'm very Oh, so you're not interested in Godot because of Thor? The pirate software guy that's doing, you know, that has he's doing a game called Heartbound, and he started he started streaming like 10 years ago, but he kind of exploded. You can adjust it, okay? He kind of exploded recently with YouTube Shorts, and he's been doing a lot of streams and stuff, and he's huge in the software category and development and things like that, and he's been a huge inspiration. He's basically telling people to just go make games and learn shit, so... Oh! No, that's a... Oh, I know I can adjust the theme. That's speaking of not straining my eyes. That's why everything is black. You know? Oh yeah, Thor was way more influential, but yeah, Breaky Beam back is huge and great. It's nice to see him back. I used to mess around with like Godot for, well, not Godot, Game Maker a long time ago, and it's nice to see Breaky back. Yeah, that is true. Maybe the contrast is a little bit too big. Let me actually check. I haven't checked all of them, of course, because there is a lot. Where was that? Display. Ah, it's in the editor settings. Oh, sorry. Yeah, project settings. There we go. Let me just cue another album, because this one is gonna end. It's got a new single out. Add to queue. I did not know that. There we go. Hey Harrow, welcome to the stream. I'm currently following a tutorial, and I am just playing around because it's very early days for me, because if you look at the tutorial, oh, you don't see it from me, wait. So if you look, I'm almost 5 hours in. Almost 5 hours into the tutorial, and it goes for 12 hours. And I think 15, we can round it up to 15 because there's a part 2 as well. But it's a top-down game. Hey, thanks for the follow, man. Very much appreciated. So it's early days, but I have been working on a little project on the side. My girlfriend is starting doing skydiving lessons, you wouldn't believe. So I've been making, and she's very passionate about skydiving, so I was thinking about doing a little skydiver top-down thing, you know? Yes, and my dream game is doing a top-down game, so I am gonna try and focus on that, maybe. I don't care that much about platformers. I mean, I do care, I play them, but not making one. Making one is not a priority. Let's just pick something that makes sense. My main priority is with the themes is I wanted to have a different theme than the guy in the tutorial has, so you can see the difference when I'm switching scenes, you know. Thank you very much. Yeah, you know, journey of 1,000 miles begins with with the first step. Are you interested in making games too? What's solarized? Ooh, I kind of like this. But look, it still won't rearrange. It's still. It still won't rearrange it. Am I fucking crazy? And you actually see better, like the different colors. I didn't notice that there are like different shades of. It was all just black. Yes. Noob here too. Well, welcome. Join our Discord, man. Everybody's welcome. We're gonna try and you know, do things together. And it's kind of cool because we're very small at the moment. So, you know, we can all talk and share and things like that. It's not like you get lost in like the millions of people, which I like very much. Ah, you're right. Yeah, I saw. It just something on Discord popped up. The guys that are joining, that's very nice. There we go. So now what I'm doing, Harrow, is defining collisions on the tile set for the houses that we are using in the tutorial. So that... Oh no, wait, fuck! I don't need collisions for the floors. I don't need this at all. Nope. Oh, can I delete the... And then paint. There we go. Oh, I was so... I do not need this at all. Okay, let's paint this. See to clear points. Okay. So we have the outer walls, we have the little ending bits, and we have the inner walls. I think that should be it. Right? Yeah, we can go back to the tutorial, I think. Oh yeah, it's easy when you speed it up like this. I can work like that. And he doesn't work on a grid. That should have been
All right.
a
And
very
this
nice thing
is
to
going to cover
show.
all of the inner walls. I hope you managed to do all of this on your own as well. I guess I should have mentioned earlier.
How's the audio mix, by the way,
There are
guys?
3 ways you can interact and draw these areas. You have Add Polygon Tool, you have Edit Points, and you have Remove.
Are those drawn or you'll add them later? What do you mean? The tile set itself was part of the kit that we downloaded for the tutorial. So if you look at the tile set itself, so this is the house that I made with it, right? So you see there are like walls, places, and blah blah blah, right? And you can put it in the level. You know, turn it around, rotate, all that. But if I go back here, if you look at the tile map and the tile set, so this is where it's actually loaded in. Where can I show you this? Patterns? Tiles. But yeah, you can see it here. So we loaded that in, and then the program, you set here the tile size, and then the program cuts everything into little tiles. It's just an image. But yeah, those individual little blue collisions you have to draw. Yeah.
The one you want to use the most is the middle one, Edit Points, because this one allows you, if you just hover it, to also add points. So this is quite easy. If you just play around with all of this, it should be fairly straightforward. But alright, with that, let me zoom out, save the scene, and now inside of the
Setup tab is where you make paintable tiles. Oh, yeah. So, paint and setup. Yes, exactly. I almost said genau. I'm living in Germany for the past 10 years. I'm a Croatian expat, and and I have a German girlfriend now, and German has just occupied my brain. And I haven't been streaming for a week and a half because I had a vacation, so I haven't spoken English in a while, and I'm not giving up. That's also the reason why I'm streaming, not just to fight procrastination so I can focus on Godot, but also to practice my English, because I do not want to lose it. I don't want to give ground to German in my head. But yeah, basically. So this is where you load it up, and then if you set it up properly, it cuts it up into pieces. This is my last tile set. Use it or lose it, exactly. And that's what that's also a problem with programming and learning Godot as well. I need to keep doing it, because just being just going on vacation for a week and a half and not touching it and like coming back, I'm like, where am I? Who am I? Alice in Wonderland. So yeah, I need to, and I already started. I did it before. I played around with GameMaker a little bit, like 3, 4, 5 years ago, and I even made a little Tamagotchi prototype. I was gonna dissect how Tamagotchi work, and I put like timers and health bars, and he was pooping and jumping around randomly and all that. But it's just like, if I leave it and I don't think about it for 2 or 3 weeks, I have to start all over again. It's insane.
level, I am going to move.
So yeah, kids. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays I'm streaming all of those 3 times a week. For the same reason.
We have the house. I'm going to move that a bit closer to the player, so I don't have to walk as much. So
yeah,
with
let's
that,
actually test that.
the outer collisions still work, the gates also work, and the inner walls are also working perfectly fine. And let's try a few more. This feels really good. Now, here there's one thing you have to be slightly aware of. And that is if I reopen the tile map and go back to the tile set and painting, you want to be really careful that when you have, there you can see it quite well. So right now for this one, we have a slight gap, which is right now so minor that you wouldn't really notice it inside of the game. But if this becomes large enough, this might be an area where the player or an enemy could get stuck in.
Yeah.
Which would be really inconsistent behavior. Oh, and I just realized I messed up a bit. So when you create, especially for walls, these kind of collision shapes, you want to be very careful. And there you can actually see this kind of shape.
That's what happened when you don't use snap, my dude.
If the player is coming from one side, so if the player is coming from this area, we might have a collision for this bit, and then the game thinks there's a corner, but there isn't in practice. So when you're drawing these areas, just be aware that you do want to have some very, very detailed shapes. And this is something you absolutely want to work on for a bit. In my case though, for tutorial, this really doesn't matter so much. And with that, we have another super important bit. And let me move the house a bit further away so this doesn't look too cramped. For the next part, to make the game look actually good, I want to talk about particles.
Nice.
And particles are basically small objects that are dynamically generated. The best example for that would be we're going to create some smoke in this part. And for that smoke, we're going to create lots of small dots and then combine them, and to the player this will look like smoke. Also, we're going to add some visuals for the laser, or more specifically, when the laser is shot. I think explaining all of this in practice is going to be much easier.
Just a sec. What just happened? Just a sec. Okay. Everything is fine.
So the best example for that would be weirdly small objects.
I think he didn't read the memo on snapping. Yeah, I mean that's hugely important, because in how many games have you noticed like an enemy just, you know, freaking out in a corner with, but that might be like collision checks themselves, because I knew in Game Maker that was like, if it's set up to the frame rate and things like that, things can get really fucked really quickly.
A bit further away so this doesn't look too cramped. About particles. And particles are basically small objects that are dynamically generated. The best example for that would be we're going to create some smoke in this part. And for that smoke, we're going to create lots of small dots and then combine them, and to the player this will look like smoke. Also, we're going to add some visuals for the laser, or more specifically, when the laser is shot. I think explaining all of this in practice is going to be much easier. So let's jump straight into Godot. Here we are back in the editor, and I want to create...
Wait, I have a question now, because this doesn't seem to work. So, I have a house that's an object. And it interacts with a player, enemy, and projectile. I have a laser that's a projectile. And it interacts with the player, enemy, and objects. But if I run the game, the laser does not collide with the level, but I do. Why is that? Let me see if the grenade interacts. Yes, yes, Jekyll. I know. See, it works with the grenade, right, and the gate. But let's see. Yeah, this works with the grenade. But the grenade is a rigid body, and laser is just an area 2D. Aha, so if it's not specified in code, nothing happens because an area 2D is not a physics body, it's just it's basically an area with a sprite. Right? So if we write in code that something happens when those two collision objects meet, then something is going to happen. Yes. I got it. I'm seeing the code. I only see blondes and brunettes, man. I don't even see the code anymore. It's gonna get a lot more complicated, but yeah, so far so good.
A new scene. And this new scene, as a base node, is going to get a static body 2D. Let's rename this one to Steam Vent. And then this I can save right away. Under scenes, there we have objects, and there I want to have the Steam Vent. Cool. Now, this one is going to get a sprite. And the sprite we can get under graphics, and in there we have objects, and under objects we have all the way at the bottom a ventilation hole. So this I want to drag in there. And this is going to give us simply a ventilation hole. Now, before we start with the actual particles, I want to give this a collision shape. And the shape here should be fairly straightforward. This needs to have a collision shape. The shape should be a circle shape. And let's align it more or less accurately. This is looking good. Cool. Also, I want to move the collision shape behind the sprite so we can see a bit better what's going on. Right now, this kind of object is going to look incredibly boring inside of the game. And to make it more interesting, I want to generate smoke that moves something like this. So we have smoke coming out of this and moving in a certain direction. And to create something like smoke, we will need a particle emitter. And like everything else in Godot, this is going to be another node.
Yeah. Something like that, for sure. Yeah, Haro, you're right. And probably initialize like a particle, spread that we're gonna do later, or that we, are learning about now. So, okay, in my skydiving game, if I want to generate objects and things, I was thinking about that, I might need a particle system, but because you can use sprites instead of, right? What I actually need in my game is like a shape to be randomized, kind of like I was thinking of like an ellipses with a clamped randomized height and width, and then apply a texture to it that's like a transparent alpha channel noise, just cloudy type thing, and that would work. So we'll see. That's what I'm trying to do, is like learning new things here, and then going back and forth and using that. I think I don't need a particle system per se for the particles for the clouds. I don't want to make the clouds out of particles. I would just use a particle emitter to spawn different, sprites basically, but I don't think that's the right way to do it. We'll see. And what I was pretty proud of, in some cases, I've actually been able to like dive into the documentation and figure things out for myself. Because, for instance, like drawing stuff for debug, I'm a very visual guy working as a technical drawer. So just like printing coordinates for me was like, I don't want this. Just show me a fucking circle on the on the screen, So I like that a lot. So I've been able to figure that out on my own. And then the the pivot offset for the scaling. I was able to figure that out on my own as well. So yeah, I used a couple of things that are not part of this tutorial at all.
So with the Steam vent selected, I click on Controller Command A, and now I type in particle. We have CPU particles and GPU particles, at least in a 2D space.
By the way, Harrow, if you go into Discord and look in the game dev channel, you can see a GIF of what I'm talking about.
Inside
the
of the
skydiving
3D
game
space, all of that gets a lot more complex. But in our case, we only have 2 nodes. And if you look at the description, we get a CPU-based particle emitter or a GPU-based particle emitter. Now, you might be wondering, what's the difference between these two? And well, if you're creating lots of particles, you want them to run on the GPU, because the GPU is much more powerful and much better at processing these kinds of particles. Unfortunately, you don't always have a graphics card available. For example, when you make a mobile game or a browser game, you might have to work with less powerful hardware. And for that, you would use CPU particles. But in our case, we are making a game for a computer, so I want to use GPU particles. Basically, the way you want to think about it is that CPU particles is for weaker systems, GPU particles is for everything else. So let's work with GPU particles 2D. I can click on Create, and nothing happened. To make something happen, we have to look...
Like 97%. I like it when it says, and I clicked it, and nothing happened. Oh yeah, I believe that, for sure. For like infrastructure reasons and, you know, resources and stuff.
On the right in the inspector. The most important attribute in there is the process material. Right now, this one is empty. We can give it a shader material or a particle process material. The second one is what we want to go for.
Okay.
And now we can actually see something.
Oh, it's
we
dripping.
have a couple of particles going in one direction.
Our Steam vent has
which arguably isn't particularly helpful, but we can customize all of that quite a bit. If you click on particle process material, there we get a whole bunch of options. For example, what we could be doing is set the emission shape. Right now, it's a point. This means all particles are emitted from this one
yeah, exactly.
point. But in my case, I want to have a sphere, and this sphere should have a certain size, depending on how large you want this area to be. So I think a bit smaller than this should be okay. And yeah, this one is looking better. If you want the particles to stop falling, you would want to look at gravity. We have 0, 98, and 0. If I set all of this to 0, 0, and 0, we get no movement at all. And in my case, I want the particles to move to the top right, so this direction. For that, I want to have x being positive, let's say, I don't know, 50. And then I want them to go up, and this would be negative, I don't know, let's say 45.
So this is like wind you can use, okay.
With that, we already get some nicer behavior. So this doesn't look terrible. Well, it still looks terrible, but it looks less terrible than before. One way to make all of this look much nicer is to look at this scale. Because in there, we have scale minimum and scale maximum. And Godot is going to pick a random number in between. Right now, they're both 1, so we always have a scale of 1. But if I make that much larger, we're getting a better behavior. So this is definitely coming together. If I now go back to the level, and with the ground node selected, add this scene, I want to add the Steam vent. And this I want to have, let me move it around. Let's put it somewhere there for now. If I now run the game again, we have a Steam vent. Although this doesn't look amazing right now. But I guess you can at the very least tell what's going on somewhat. The major issue we have right now is that we always have a square. So this isn't great. And this we cannot change inside of the process material. So this I want to minimize for now. Instead, what we need is a texture. And the texture is going to be an image. So under, I think I put it under decals, there we have white.png. This is the graphic I want to use. And to use it, I simply have to drag it into the texture. And now we are getting some very strange behavior. The reason why this is happening is because the graphic is way too large. Or more specifically, inside of the process material under scale, we have...
Wait. Where did he drag it in? Ah, texture. When you close the thing, it's inside.
a way too large maximum scale. Let's set this to a 3, and this is going to feel much better. And this is looking much more like actual Steam. So let's try this again. And, well, we are making progress. Still not amazing, but certainly better. I suppose the most important thing for now is we don't have that many dots. And for that, at the amount all the way at the top, I want to set this to, let's go with 20. And this is feeling a little bit better. Another thing that you could be doing, if you look at color, there we have color and color ramp. For example, you could change the opacity a bit and then make all of this a touch darker. And I think we do need a lot more dots. So instead of 20, let's go with 60. And possibly even higher, maybe 100. That probably feels a good bit better. What I can also do is lower the opacity and then just see what feels good. When it comes to particle systems, you do want to play around a lot, and there's a lot of stuff you can do. So all of these options, you can just play with them and see what you like. What you see quite often is a ramp. So in this case, the color ramp. What this one is doing right now, it's empty. If I give it a new gradient texture 1D, then we get some weird behavior. And what this one is doing is when a particle is spawned, it starts with black, and then over time it becomes white.
As the lifetime goes, it changes.
So if I click on it and double click on that, we get another color. And let's say I want a particle to start white with full transparency. And then towards the end, so I click on the ending bit, I want transparency to go basically away entirely and have this thing go into a darker color. And there you can see we have a new gradient, and this one is giving us a different kind of behavior. And
wait, looks a bit different by me.
So in this case, the color ramp. What this one is doing right now, it's empty. If I give it a new gradient texture 1D, then we get some weird behavior. And what this one is doing is when a particle is spawned, it starts with black, and then over time it becomes white. We could change this. So if I click on it and double click on that, we get another color. And let's say I want a particle to start white with full transparency. And then towards the end, so I click on the ending bit, I want transparency to go basically away entirely and have this thing go into a darker color. And there you can see we have a new gradient, and this one is giving us a different kind of behavior. And that should be a decently okayish behavior for inside of the game. So once again, for this kind of thing, you do want to play around a lot to get the kind of look that you want. You could also change the scale and give this one a curve. But in my case, I think the color was a bit too strong. So let me give this a bit more opacity, especially towards the end. This might have been a bit too low. And then the color could be a bit brighter. And then I also want to have, for the gravity, slightly faster movement. So instead of 50, I want 100. Instead of negative 45, I want to have negative 150. On top of that, the emission shape could be a bit larger. So this feels better. And then for the amount of particles, let's go with 200. And there we go. This is coming together much better. So with that, we have some steam. And what you really want to be aware of, that you are spawning a huge amount of particles.
Yes.
And for that, if you have a proper GPU, this isn't going to be too taxing, especially in a 2D environment. But still, you do want to be conscious of the performance. So use this sparingly. One good way to do that is to only have a certain amount of particles. 200 is still fine, but in your own game, test this a lot. Changing the amount of particles can make a huge difference. I suppose I should also mention we have time, collision, drawing, and trails. Time is the one I want to focus on for now. In there, for example, we have a lifetime. If we extend that, we get much longer living particles.
Yeah.
Although in my case, I'm not really interested in that. And this is still way too long.
It would be
to
insane.
1.5 to some kind of custom value.
Like for something as you know, as steam vents, or even like a torch, you know, or something for a flame that you put everywhere in the level. Yeah, that would be insane probably.
And what is much more important, you can also set one shot. This is something we are going to explore in just a bit. But if I set this one to on, then we get lots of particles, and then they disappear, because we are only spawning every particle just once. And you can see at the top, emitting is off. If I set this to on again, we get all of the particles, but just once, and there we go. We can do this multiple times, and we only always have one round of particles.
The thing that seems really cool in this regard is normally if what I'm thinking about is like if you have a game like Minecraft, or not Minecraft, but you know, like a survival game where you can put torches down, and it's a top-down game like this one is. What's cool about this is by changing the gravity, you can simulate like different wind direction, right? Because otherwise, if you're not using that, why not just bake this as an animation and use it like that, right? That would save a lot of processing power, right? If you like export that as an animation and then turn it into sprites and just like rotate that this whole time. That's at least how I'm thinking about it, right? But yeah, I really like this because of the potential of like immersion and, you know, having wind and things like that.
I don't want to enable it. So I just want to have emitting enabled and one shot set to false. Now, besides that, you could also look at drawing or collision, but all of this is a bit more advanced, so I'm going to ignore it. Instead, what I want you guys to do is when the player is shooting a laser, inside of the player, I want you guys to spawn some particles along with the laser. And to be a bit more precise, for the exercise, I want you guys to emit particles when the player is shooting a laser. You can reuse the same texture, but make sure that you are changing lots of other attributes, like the color or the scaling or the duration. Just see what looks good. Finally, a really important part is that one shot needs to be enabled.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We only want to spawn a couple of particles when the player has shot a laser, but they should not be continuous. So with that, pause the video and try to implement your own particle system.
Okay. The only thing I'm thinking about is where in the tree it should be, but it should be on the player, right? So if we go to the player, let's look at the player's code. Yeah, we have the shooting here, so let's do it. So we're gonna add a particle to the, what do you want? Material, yeah. So we assign it texture. No, there was another thing first. Subemitter? Nope. Process material. There we go. New particle process material. We could use something else that would make it more fun. Let's see what else do we have here. Explosions. Fuck yeah. Gun. Grunge. Blood. Yeah, let's just keep it simple. Let's use the same. Okay. We're gonna move this here. Then... so let's say it's gonna be like 10 sparks. Can't you randomize and clamp the amount as well? Why does the amount have to be this static? Direction should be minus... ah, they're spread. Cool. In degrees, so it should be 180 degrees spread. There we go. Flatness along the y-axis. Oh. Ooh. Oh, that's a cool tip. Thanks. Yeah, let's use a start or... yeah, let's use the start of the explosion as like a little sparky spark. Let's see. But I would need to cut it myself, right? Usable as a texture. I don't think like particles. Oh yeah, look at this. Hey, you know what? Let me do this real quick in Paint. Downloads, where was this back? In the texture of inspector. Okay, wait. Eh. And then I have no idea what region. Aha, there we go. I got you, I got you. That I even understood what you were saying. I'm feeling very proud about that right now. Maybe this and then scale it way down so it looks like a little sparky spark. I think that would be cool. This maybe? Let's see how this goes. We can edit. We can edit that later. Just take a new. Would that work? It's working! Oh, thank you very much. This, yeah, this made it a lot easier. So we need not direction. You change gravity, right? Wee! Yeah. I got it. Jackal, let me cook. To learn this myself too. Initial velocity. Okay, can actually go. Okay, definitely need to scale this way down. Oh! I'm having too much fun right now. Oh, we need an angle. Oh yeah, random angle. All the way. Oh, fuck, yeah. Can it keep rotating once it's shot? Tangential acceleration. Is that it? I have no idea what it means by tangential acceleration. Okay. Damping. Ah, damping curve. Nope. That all seems fine. Hue variation. Aha, it can change. Yeah, it can be a different color. Maybe we can make it a little bit redder or a little bit... Yeah! Yeah! Okay. Now let's do like 20. Lifetime needs to be way down. Emission shape. Directed points. Point texture. What? Yeah, that's not right because it's spawning stuff behind it as well. At the bottom. Aha, time. Here? Yeah, lifetime, okay. But what's the time up here then? Ah, it's the randomness. Aha, that's for the process material, not the... okay. Oh, that's when you put the lifetime down. It's not what I had in mind. Actually. Ooh, actually from way up here that doesn't look that bad. It actually looks like a sparky spark. A little bit pew pew. A little bit too fantastic. It doesn't match like the lasery. Wait, we can make it blue. Haha, with the hue shift. Hue variation. Green. Where's blue? Green. Aha, color. Wait. Yeah, but this is fine. This is gonna work too. Wait, how can I set both? Is it one or the other? Am I crazy? Why is everything black now? Aha, because of the hue variation. Let's set this back to 0. Color, choose raw. Color. Ah, raw. Okay, thanks. But am I crazy? Why isn't blue working? Why is blue black? Why is blue black? Wait, I'm changing something somewhere else. Gravity, initial velocity, radial acceleration. But you don't have to be great to hue shift something, do you? Particle. Color swap, yeah. That does make sense, yeah, but... Maybe just a pure yellow light works better with the blue. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. Can get on with the tutorial. This helped me a lot. Thank you very much. This is pretty cool. Raw can alter color base but removes definition of sprite. What do you mean by definition of sprite? You mean like the definition as in detail? I gotcha. And we need to put it on one, just once, right? One shot. I killed it. It's not working anymore. What did I do? There's trails too. Emitting. Wow. Interplate. What is it? One shot. What was this now? Ooh. Okay, I accidentally made a fucking disco ball. Okay, cool. Maybe let's just put a scale down a little bit and then that's it. Let's say 1 and let's say this is can I go point something? 0.5. Oh, I can. And then say 2. There we go. Yeah. No, I know, but it turned it off up here in the meeting. Because it turned off one shot and nothing happened, so I was like, what? Okay. Cool. I think we can keep going. This seems to work.
With the player selected, I want to add another node, which is going to be GPU particles 2D. This one right now is giving us a warning that we don't have a material. For that, I want to have a process material, which is going to be a particle process material. If I have that selected, we get particles that are barely visible. And right away, we have to make one change. And that is that these particles should be at the nozzle of the gun, basically here. Next up, the direction doesn't work at all. So this one we also have to update. That we can do quite easily. Inside of the process material, I want to update the direction. Although to be a bit more specific, we have direction and we have the gravity. The gravity by default should be 0, 0, and 0. So the particles don't move at all. However, then we have a direction, which right now by default is 1, 0, and 0. So we should only have movement in the x-axis. But this we can't see at all right now. Everything just is static, so we have a white dot there. To change that, we want to give each particle an initial velocity. And this we can do on the right. There we have initial velocity. And let's give it some randomness. So
yeah,
like
this looks better.
And that is looking significantly better. For these numbers inside of direction, you can update the spread. In my case, I went with 15. This is a much more narrow range, but once again, just choose whatever you think is looking good. Besides that, if I minimize these two tabs, the next important part is we will need a texture. And I still have white.png, and this I want to drag in there. And with that, we get something much more visible. So this is a good start. And let's try the scene itself. And let's hope this is still working. And yeah, it's kind of working, especially if you move around. This doesn't work perfectly yet, but at the very least we get something. The main thing I'm looking for is that all of this aligns with the player direction. So if the player moves or looks at the top right, the particles move in this direction as well. Which they do, so this is a good start. The one important thing that might be a bit of a challenge is that we only want to spawn these particles when the player is shooting a laser. And for that, under time, I want to set one shot and enable it and set it to true. And now inside of the code, so the player code, and this I do want to extend. Whenever we have an input action for the primary action, this if statement, I want to emit the particles, which I can do quite easily. I want to get my particles node, so GPU particles 2D, and this has an attribute called emitting, which I want to set to true. And that is actually all we needed. So if I now run the game again, I can shoot a laser, and there we get a couple of particles. I can do this multiple times.
Oh, wow.
We get a couple of particles.
Guys, I think mine looks actually really good. Look. So like Sparky. Spark. Pew. Pew. Actually, the scale is now too small. Ruby, I don't see shit from your head. Ruby. Don't care. I know you don't care. Let's put this as it was to 1. Try this again. I don't see the screen. Oh! It was point 1 and point 3, not 1 and 3. Yeah, I know. You're tired. I'm kind of tired as well. Huh. That turned out way better than I was ever hoping It would. You don't actually get the feeling for it and the timing until you actually put it in code. That's cool. Okay. I'm happy with that.
So this is working, but the particles look terrible. So this isn't great yet. Also, if I shoot multiple lasers, this is really inconsistent. So we have to update some things. Which means with the GPU particles selected, we have to update a lot of these attributes to make all of this look good. What I started with was the initial velocity. Right now, this is quite low. I have set these numbers to 750 and 1000. If I run all of this again, we get particles that move really, really far because, well, we have a really high initial velocity.
If you clamp it with a
To
timer,
account for
that
this
could actually look
speed,
pretty good.
I want to set the lifetime of each particle to a much lower number. Let's say 0.2. And now if I run this again, each particle moves very, very quickly. So this is definitely an improvement. Although all of the particles are still much too large. For that, and the scale, I want to have a scale minimum of 0.05 and a scale maximum of 0.1. If I run that again, now we get particles that are way too small. So these numbers are probably a bit overly aggressive. Let's say 0.5 and 1.
Yeah, basically just play around with it.
And that's
because there's a lot of things you can change.
I guess 0.3 and 0.8 should work. And this is just a thing you have to practice over and over. Eventually, you find some numbers that you like. Next up though, much more importantly, I want to work on the color. This is the part that really doesn't work right now. Instead of a white color, I want to have some light bluish because that's the color of the laser as well. Also, the transparency should not be full. I want to have some fairly see-through kind of color. So if I run this again, that is starting to come together much more nicely. Also, we can give this a color ramp, which is a gradient texture 1D. And for this one, we can set a color. The starting color is the color I have just set. And in there, we have a hexadecimal color. This we can simply copy with Control or Command S and then paste it in there. Now we get this starting color. And for the end color, I want to have the same color, except I want to make this
brighter,
more whitish and less transparent. At the end, you should have some kind of gradient that looks something like this. We start with a bluish tint, and then we become more and more transparent. If I run.
The only question I have is, I can't understand how this graph like works. It is the same in like Photoshop or GIMP or any also Illustrator, things like that. But why isn't it here at the end? Isn't this like the lifespan of everything? Why does it have this little bit that's not getting used? Or am I reading this wrong? Because it looks like the ramp only goes like 4/5 of the way.
That one again, we get something that's barely visible. So we want this to be more. So we want to increase these numbers a bit. And once again, this is just something you have to play around with. We get some very faint.
Yeah, the color preview, but it's the ramp's gradient, right? And normally this should be like the start of the gradient and all the way back should be the end of the gradient. So I don't understand why. Is it just so it's easier to grasp? I don't know why, you know, it stops before. It's not a full gradient. It stops, the gradient stops and then becomes a full color. It's the selected color. So it's the handle is here, but you're basically choosing the whole gradient, right? Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, actually kind of see it going even more transparent here. The little drag bars are the colors. The right panel is the color of that drag bar. So this little panel here shows it previews this color inside. Okay. So if I clicked here, it would be that color. Let's check if I understood you correctly. So color ramp. Wait. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're okay. I understand. Jackal, you're amazing. Thank you.
Particle effects. Although I think the initial velocity could even be higher. Let's go with 1200 to 1500. And
pew, pew.
There's certainly something that works.
Yeah, or you double click the little slit, right? So either double click this little 3 pixels. Yeah, or here. Nice, okay. I really like the UI of Godot. It's very clean. I mean, Game Maker wasn't that much different, but the little touches like this really make it user friendly. And let me tell you, as somebody who's been drawing in like 15 different CAD programs, user friendly is a big thing, because there are some amazing CAD programs that are not user friendly at all, and then there are some that really are. I have a feeling my mom could start drawing in those.
You can play around with all of this to a great extent. And if you want your game to look good, then obviously you have to spend a lot of time with all of this. In my case though, this is a tutorial, so let's say for this part we are basically done. The next major aspect that I want to work on is going...
Oh, okay. So guys, I think we're gonna call it here, because I am really looking forward to the next. Then lighting and animations is next. I am really looking forward to that. So, because I haven't streamed in the last 1.5 weeks because I was on vacation, and I still am, I'll be streaming tomorrow basically the whole afternoon. So I think from around 2 p.m. to the whole evening. So we'll be going through a lot, and maybe jumping back and forth and trying to do the tutorial and then working on the game a little bit, just to oh my god, I look like I'm from hell. My camera color correction and everything. But yeah, it seemed like it, man. I was really surprised when I watched a video yesterday, I think, that explained all like 90 something 40 something nodes in Godot, and for like that really stark shadows and lighting and everything, the nodes are pretty simple, and it looks really nice. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that a lot, because I don't know if you know about the game called Darkwood, but and like Stalker and a lot of different games, but that immersion or a feeling of really thick atmosphere that's done just by tweaking little stuff or having little stuff very very sensitive attention to detail is something that I'm very much interested in my future work, if you want to say it that way. So I want to really look at lighting and animations and things like that, and sound design as well. But maybe having simpler graphics, but then, or making a 2D game which is simpler than 3D in any case. But The clipping outer objects of the lights be a bit of a though. Yeah, I don't know what you mean exactly, but you can get into the details and with pretty much every aspect of game dev. So yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much what I'm very much interested in. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. So yeah. The clipping outer objects of the lights. Ah, you mean like the way you have a point of view, or actually like the... Yeah, I mean, every little bit you add is extra work, right? But just... Yeah, I know what you mean. But if you look at how amazingly atmospheric the forest is, and how everything creepy is, and how scary the game is without having one jump scare at all, the game is amazing. That's... If I one day make a game that's 1/10 as good as Darkwood, I'd say that's a success. So yeah. Tune in tomorrow, guys. Follow on Discord. Let me share a link once more, because on Discord you'll get all the... I have events, so if you want to follow and know when things are happening, and we can, you know, share our progress and stuff and work together and things like that. And that's why I started this. I started this channel basically because I wanted to fight procrastination, so I actually work on the stuff when I sit down. That's the first thing. The second one is to inspire people to do, you know, if you waited to start playing guitar, to start learning languages, to learn Godot, anything. I'm 37 years old and I just started this for the first time in my life. So yeah, why not? What's the wait? We're never gonna have as much time as we have now. Maybe in retirement, but you know, by then we'll be like in Mad Max fighting over a can of dog food. So I don't want to think. I don't think I want to wait till retirement for anything. So yeah, that's about it for me today. As I said, tomorrow's gonna be a long day, long stream day, and then the next one is in your regularly scheduled program on Saturday. Thanks everybody for joining in. Thanks for all the new people here as well. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.